You know, ladies and gentlemen, some days in politics, especially in South Africa, you look at the news and you just think, oh, there's nothing to talk about today. I'm going to have to try to find some stories and make the news sound interesting. And then something bizarre happens and the news is really interesting, like lots of fun. Anyway, before we get on to the main video of today, can I yet again remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. It really does help me grow those numbers. So come on, baby, let's get straight into the news. The first news is, and these were the minor stories that I found before the main story of today. The first news is around the Paul Mashatile assassination attempt. You may recall I did a video around this. This was basically the shots that were fired at Paul's car as he left an engagement somewhere around Birchwood, and it turned out subsequently he said it was an assassination attempt, and then it was stray rocks, and then it was stray pellets from a shotgun and whatever else. Well, news has emerged that actually Paul knew it wasn't an assassination attempt, and he knew that it wasn't directed at him. But according to the latest news article, Paul tried to use it in order to bolster his political attempts. Yeah, we all knew that, but it's nice for the media to suddenly confirm what we already knew, right? Anyway, let's go on to the next news article. And this one actually is in relation to something that I myself am starting to get very annoyed at. And that is the constant decay to the state's infrastructure. We constantly see the looting of street poles, traffic lights, you name it. It gets stolen. If it's out there, it gets stolen. And according to the Herald, the latest place to be ransacked is a cemetery. And you know, cemeteries are usually really important. In Judaism, for example, we actually call them house of living or house of eternity, because it's the place where you rest until you're resurrected from the dead, if you're Hasidic, that is. But the basic idea behind them is that the actual place themselves are kind of sacred. That's where you rest. And so the idea of the sacred is embodied in the way that you look after cemeteries. If you look after cemeteries with a degree of care and attention, this shows you that you have almost a reverence for the living. And so your approach to the living is reflected in your approach to the dead. And it's atrocious to see thieves now just ransacking graves. I mean, how low can you go? Talking of the absolute low that you can go, Cyril REFUSES was accosted today and asked, well, what are you going to do about the kill the boer, kill the farmer chance? Are you actually going to, I don't know, make it illegal?
For us. And when it comes to the issues of arresting anyone for any slogan, that is a sovereign issue. It's not a matter where we need to be instructed by anyone that go and arrest this one. We are a very proud sovereign country that has its own laws, that has its own processes, and we take into account what the Constitutional Court also decided when it said that, you know, that slogan, kill the boer, kill the farmer, is a liberation chant and slogan. And it's not meant to be a message that elicits or calls upon anyone to go and be killed. And that is what our court decided. So they will probably want to arrest people willy-nilly. We follow the dictates of our Constitution because we are a constitutional state and we are a country where freedom of expression is the bedrock of our constitutional arrangements.
In relation to the question from Donald Trump as to why he hasn't arrested Julius Malema, and in relation to that chant, he says, well, we take note of that judgment, which says that the singing of the song relates to the revolutionary song. You know, the revolutionary song is a historical artifact. It's not actually a rally cry to war or to kill some people. It's a revolutionary historical artifact. And so because of that, they continue to sing it. And the courts have said that that's okay, and so it's not his place to go against what the courts have decided, because we're a country of rules, he says, and a country of norms, and that's the norm being set by the courts. So regardless of how much Donald Trump doesn't like it, he says, well, that doesn't mean he can willy-nilly just arrest Julius Malema. And there is some truth in that. But I'm reminded that the previous flag, the apartheid flag, was banned because the flag itself was constituted as being hateful, was a hateful flag, not a historical artifact. It's funny how that argument only ever seems to go one way. In any case, let's get on to the fun stuff for today, because boy, was it fun. Like, really fun. So this was actually Cyril Ramaphosa in Parliament, where he got to do, well, Q&A. And it started off really boring. It started off with things such as mining taxation and whether additional taxes would be levied against the mining industry because, they're taking the minerals out of the country, minerals are finite, and we want to basically get the most amount of tax for that and empower the localities where these things are. It's like really boring. Anyway, then the PA's MP, Marlon Daniels, came out with a cracker. And he said, on which specific legal or statutory provisions does the government rely on when it classifies as the Khoisan, coloured, Indian or white South Africans as not being African in particular after more than 3 decades of democracy? What a cracker. So Cyril Ramaphosa says, actually all South Africans are African. So just remember that. We've all graduated to African. We're no longer colonizers, so we can't go back to Europe. I mean, we're African. Cyril said it himself. You might want to tell that to some of the people in your political party, Cyril, because I don't think they got the message. But anyway, he then said that what must be related to is the discriminatory laws, which they still use to today, because those laws were used during apartheid to disadvantage previously disadvantaged individuals. And so for that purpose and that context, that classification of the apartheid times is still used in order for the redistribution or the fixing of the historical injustices. Now, that's really, really important because many individuals have said in relation to those laws, those apartheid laws, that they no longer apply. But Cyril himself is saying, actually they do, but they apply for a different reason. They apply for let's call it the redress. The redress, which Cyril says has to be done because according to him, he says, we can't forget apartheid. It wasn't just a bad dream. You can't just ignore it. If you ignored it, it would be like putting a Band-Aid on a deep sore. He says that major work needs to be done on the injury, and that's why everything should be named. And again, I have to look at this and say, well, in one respect, you're saying we're all African. In another respect, you're saying we're not in accordance with apartheid because you need to have revenge against the people who caused apartheid. So they are African, but they're not. And you see, Cyril, this is why people get confused and think that you're full of cuck, because this is not a logical argument. You're trying to say something in order to appease others, but it doesn't really make sense if you think about this logically for 2 minutes. An ANC minister then thought that they would be really bright and talk about the Department for Small Business Development and say, are they committed to assisting businesses as much as possible? And so Ramaphosa says, well, yes, they want to create entrepreneurs because they must grow the economy and they must attract investors. So I've got to highlight to you, bud, the investors that you need are multinationals, like the big ones, the massive ones. You don't want a mom and pop store. Yes, we want mom and pop stores locally, but you need the big multinational. The big multinationals are what kickstarts the economy, not mom and pop stores. In any case, he then says that actually when you grow the economy, you lower unemployment, which is what we need. But then the EFF came out and said, yes, but Cyril's own governments have actually failed to grow the economy and they've failed to lower the unemployment rate. In fact, they've failed to shield the poor. He says, when Cyril went to the US last week, how did that help the economy? And to that, Cyril Ramaphosa responds and said, well, actually it did, because if we lose the relationship between the US and South Africa, this will impact the economy adversely to the point where, to be frank, South Africa would be screwed. So it's nice that he actually acknowledges that. And he says the actual objectives of the US trip were threefold. One was to reset the relationship, and it was to set up a process of engagement between the US and South Africa. The other was to discuss the G20 and then highlight the US's role in having to come to that, because at the end of it, Cyril's got to hand it over to Donald Trump, and he doesn't want to hand it over to an empty seat because that will make him look really dumb. So Cyril says exactly how he intends to actually create this economic boom. He says that what we're going to have is we're going to invest in infrastructure over 1 trillion rand over the next 3 years. And what he's also going to have is a load of regulatory reforms. He's going to spearhead this through Operation Vulundile. I don't know how he's going to do that because that entire operation is just nothing, to be frank. And if anything, regulations have got stricter and not more relaxed. And then he basically says that what he's going to do is he's going to look for growth sectors such as mining and sustainable energy. Like, dude, we've been mining and doing sustainable energy for how long? Like, you got to get to a point where there's just nothing left to do. Now, very curiously, Corné Mulder then asks the elephant in the room. He says, well, actually, you talk about all these things, infrastructure spending, which you and I, ladies and gentlemen, we know that that's all going to go to cadres and the money's just going to get looted. But Corné Mulder says, actually, if you really want to spearhead the economy, you need to change policy because it's your current policy that's led to an economic decline. He says does that mean that you're going to amend BE legislation and the expropriation without compensation legislation in order to attract new economic investment? And Cyril says, well, actually, the GNU are going to spend significant hours discussing everybody's growth ambitions and the economy. But he does say that he's always surprised when people talk about Black economic empowerment as being one of the things that have damaged the economy, because according to him, that's not what the World Bank says. He says the World Bank says that BEE actually improves the economy. And to that, Cyril, I'd say, dude, do you even read these reports? Like, this has been well documented. The World Bank told you to drop BEE. So here you are saying that actually it improves the economy when every metric possible tells you BEE does not improve the economy. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's be clear, because Cyril doesn't seem to understand this. There is Black economic empowerment, which is the improvements of the previously disadvantaged in order to make them middle class, higher incomers, even top earners or elite, if you want to call them that. There is that ambition, which, to be frank, all of us want to see. Like, I don't want to see anybody in poverty or poor. And then there are BEE policies that specifically stop other ethnic groups from economically advancing by promoting the interests of the previously disadvantaged on the basis that they were advantaged and it's their time to shine. It's the BEE policies that all of us are against, because those policies aren't for the previously disadvantaged. They're actually for the politically connected, the elite that wish to enrich themselves. We all know this, including the World Bank. But you see, Cyril doesn't seem to be able to make the distinction between the ambition of making the previously disadvantaged, the poor, if you were, middle class and higher income earners, versus the policies that are parasitical. When we all talk about the BEE parasite, we're talking about the policies. Like, most of us know this, apart from Cyril. In any case, after that, the entire thing degraded into, well, to be frank, lunacy, because the EFF went off on one. They shouted and ranted and raved, and they disrupted Cyril Ramaphosa for at least the next hour, to the point where, to be frank, he ran out of time. The EFF had to be removed. They were constantly screaming. And the ANC MP, Cameron Dugmore, basically said that this here was exactly why the EFF was losing support, because of their chaotic behavior. The EFF had stopped Cyril Ramaphosa from addressing questions in the House for nearly an hour. And the EFF's behavior now in the country is just at a level where nobody actually feels they can support it anymore. And to this, I agree with Cameron. He's 100% correct. So there you are, ladies and gentlemen. That's the news for today. Apparently, we've all graduated to not being colonizers. But that doesn't mean that you're not discriminated on and you're still white and colored and you're still a colonizer. ANZ logic, baby. Anyway, these are just my views. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Until tomorrow. Bye.